Okay, so ready to ditch those boring textbooks and really get into real English conversation?
Yeah.
You've come to the right place. We're doing a deep dive today into a podcast episode from Everyday English Secrets.
I love that one.
Called Unlocking the Secrets to Mastering Conversational English.
Oh, yeah.
Which is full of tips and stories about navigating those messy, everyday, real-life English situations that textbooks just don't really prepare you for.
Yeah? What's so interesting about conversational English is it kind of throws the formal rules out the window.
Right.
It's like jazz.
Yeah.
You know, there's structure, but there's also this element of improvisation.
Oh, totally. Remember that time I tried to impress my Danish friend by using the idiom spill the tea?
Oh, no.
And I thought it literally meant to offer them a cup of tea.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they were very confused.
The pitfalls of idioms.
Yeah.
A perfect example of how tricky conversational English can be.
Yeah.
Especially for non-native speakers.
For sure.
But it also highlights something really important.
Okay.
The value of asking questions.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not sure about a phrase or an idiom, just ask. Most native speakers are happy to explain.
Yeah, and it's not just idioms. Even simple greetings can trip you up.
Oh, tell me about it.
The Everyday English Secrets hosts shared a story about one of them being completely baffled by WhatsApp.
Really?
When they first moved to New York.
Wow.
They thought people were genuinely asking about the ceiling.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
It's funny, right?
Yeah.
How those everyday phrases can take on different meanings depending on the context.
For sure.
But it also underscores the importance of mastering those really common greetings and responses.
Oh yeah.
They're the building blocks of any conversation.
Yes.
You need that foundation.
Absolutely.
Before you can start building those more complex interactions.
That's totally.
It's like learning scales on the piano before you try to tackle a concerto.
Yeah, good analogy.
So how do we get this foundation? The podcast hosts suggest immersing yourself in real conversations, even if it's through movies or TV shows or other podcasts.
Absolutely. You know what else they said?
What?
Pay attention to the nuances of those conversations, like filler words.
Filler words.
The ones we sprinkle through our speech.
I never really thought about it like that before. It's those filler words are the secret ingredient to making English sound more natural and less robotic.
Right.
Have you ever noticed how often you use filler words?
I have, and it's fascinating because those little words help us process information and signal our thought processes.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're a natural part of spoken language.
Right.
And they actually make conversations flow more smoothly.
So interesting. It's they're the punctuation marks in spoken language.
I like that.
They're adding pauses and emphasis where it's needed.
Speaking of adding flavor to language, let's talk about idioms.
Okay.
The Everyday English Secrets host shares some of their favorites, like break the ice, to describe making people feel more comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
When you know somebody expresses an idea perfectly.
I love how idioms add color and personality to the language, but I've always found them a bit intimidating to learn.
Oh yeah, why is that?
It's like trying to memorize a secret code or something.
Well, it's not just about memorizing a list.
Okay.
The key is to understand the figurative meaning behind the idiom.
Yeah.
And how it's used in context.
Okay.
It's like learning a new dance move. You have to see how it's done before you can try it yourself.
So instead of just memorizing the dictionary definition,
Yeah.
it's more about understanding the feeling or the image that the idiom evokes.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it's important to remember that idioms can vary across, cultures and regions. What might be a common expression in one place could sound totally bizarre somewhere else.
Totally. And that's a great point.
Right.
It reminds me of how language isn't just about words and grammar.
Yeah.
But it's also about understanding the culture and context behind those words.
Totally. Now, what about pronunciation?
Yeah.
Pronunciation. The podcast hosts touched on how this can be a challenge for non-native speakers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They specifically addressed a question from a listener.
Okay.
Who was struggling with the pronunciation of thought versus taught.
Oh, yeah.
These what we call minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs.
In linguistics, words that differ by just one sound.
I remember struggling with those kinds of words too. It's like trying to distinguish between two almost identical shades of blue.
Exactly. And they highlighted how practicing these minimal pairs can help refine your pronunciation and become more attuned to those subtle sound differences.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
I wish I knew about minimal pairs when I was first learning English.
Yeah, and they offered some reassurance
to
those who might be feeling self-conscious about their accents.
Right.
The goal is clarity, not perfection.
Yeah.
Accents are a natural part of language, and they contribute to your unique voice.
I totally agree. It's about expressing yourself effectively, not sounding like a robot or something.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the importance of mastering those basic greetings, understanding idioms in context, practicing minimal pairs to improve pronunciation, and we've learned that it's okay to make mistakes, ask questions, embrace those little nuances that make conversational English so dynamic and interesting.
So, are you ready to continue exploring conversational English secrets?
I am.
In part 2,
Let's do it.
we'll dive into the importance of practice, overcoming the fear of making mistakes, and finding opportunities to put your skills to the test.
I'm ready.
I'm ready to uncover more practical tips that can help me feel more confident in conversations.
Right.
What else did the Everyday English Secrets hosts have to share?
Well, they tackled a topic
Okay.
that I think a lot of us can relate to: the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, for sure.
It's something that can really hold us back from really engaging in conversations.
Absolutely. I remember feeling so self-conscious when I first started speaking English.
Oh yeah.
Terrified of saying the wrong thing or sounding foolish.
I get it. But the podcast hosts had some really encouraging advice about overcoming this fear. Emphasize that, mistakes are inevitable, part of the learning process. In fact, they're actually valuable because they provide opportunities for growth.
That's a good point. It's like when you're learning to play a new sport or a musical instrument, you're gonna fumble the ball or hit the wrong notes at first, but those mistakes help you refine your skills.
Absolutely.
And improve over time.
And the host connected this idea
Okay.
of embracing mistakes to the broader concept of practicing conversational English.
Okay.
They stress the importance of actively seeking out opportunities to interact with native speakers.
That's where I think a lot of language learners get stuck.
Yeah.
We can spend hours studying grammar and vocabulary,
Right.
but it's the real-life conversations that help us internalize the language and really develop fluency.
And they pointed out that this practice doesn't have to be a formal or structured activity. It can be as simple as chatting with a cashier at the store, striking up a conversation with a colleague at work, or even joining an online language exchange group.
I love that they emphasize that finding ways to integrate conversational practice into our everyday lives.
Yeah.
It's about making it a habit rather than a chore.
They also suggested some specific techniques for practicing.
Yeah.
One that caught my attention was the shadowing technique,
Shadowing.
where you listen to a native speaker
Okay.
and try to mimic their pronunciation and intonation
Oh, wow.
as closely as possible.
That sounds like a fun way to practice.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're becoming an actor,
Right.
taking on the role of a native speaker
Exactly.
and embodying their way of speaking.
It's about training your ear and your vocal muscles to reproduce those sounds and rhythms that are characteristic of natural spoken English.
And the host also talked about the importance of finding language partners
Yes.
who can provide feedback and encouragement.
He stressed the value of having someone who can not only correct your mistakes,
Right.
but also celebrate your progress and motivate you to keep practicing.
It's like having a personal trainer for your language skills.
Totally.
Someone who can help you stay on track and achieve your conversational goals.
The Everyday English Secrets hosts really hammered home this idea
Okay.
that consistent practice is the key
Right.
to unlocking fluency and confidence in spoken English.
For sure.
They encourage listeners to be persistent, even when it feels challenging or frustrating.
It's that old adage, practice makes progress.
Exactly.
And when it comes to language learning, it's a journey, not a destination. There's always something new to learn and discover.
They wrapped up the episode
Okay.
with a final piece of advice that I think is really relevant
Okay.
for anyone learning a new language.
I'm all ears. What was their parting wisdom?
They encourage listeners to be patient with themselves.
Okay.
Learning a language takes time and effort and a whole lot of grace. It's important to acknowledge and celebrate the progress you make,
Right.
no matter how small it may seem.
That's such a valuable reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others, or feeling discouraged when we don't progress as quickly as we like. But language learning is a personal journey.
Absolutely.
And we all move at our own pace.
And they reminded us that the ultimate goal of learning a language
Yeah.
is to connect with others
Right.
and experience the world in a new and enriching way.
It's about opening doors to new friendships, cultures, and opportunities.
For sure.
And it's about expanding our horizons.
Yes.
And embracing the beauty of human communication.
So we've explored a wealth of insight from the Everyday English Secrets podcast. We've learned about the importance of mastering those basic greetings, understanding idioms and context, practicing minimal pairs, and using techniques like shadowing to improve pronunciation.
Yes, and we've been reminded that mistakes are valuable learning opportunities, that consistent practice is key, and that patience and self-compassion are essential on this language learning journey.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to pose a question to you.
Oh, I'll lay it on me.
What's one specific action you could take today to incorporate these conversational tips into your own life?
That's a great question. We've covered so much
Yeah.
in this deep dive. Maybe try using a new idiom today, or actively listen for those filler words that we talked about. The next time you're watching a movie or listening to a podcast,
Or maybe try that shadowing technique
oh yeah,
and mimic a native speaker's pronunciation for a few minutes. Even something as simple as striking up a conversation with someone you wouldn't normally talk to.
right.
It can be a great way to stretch your conversational muscles.
It all comes back to stepping outside of our comfort zones and embracing those opportunities to practice,
Absolutely.
even if they feel a little intimidating at first.
And it's like anything else we want to get good at.
Yeah.
The more we do it, the
Right.
more comfortable and confident we become.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive
Okay.
into the world of conversational English,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways we should keep in mind?
Well, firstly, remember that real-life conversations are messy and unpredictable.
Yeah,
They're not like those perfectly scripted dialogues you find in textbooks. Embrace the spontaneity and the imperfections.
it's more like a jazz improvisation than a classical symphony.
I like that.
It's about finding your own rhythm and expressing yourself authentically.
Secondly, those basic greetings and responses, they're more important than you might think.
Totally.
They're the foundation of any conversation.
For sure.
So make sure you've got a solid grasp of those common phrases.
It's like knowing your basic dance steps before you hit the dance floor,
Once you have those down, you can start freestyling and adding your own flair.
And finally, practice, practice, practice.
Yes.
The more you use your conversational English skills in those real-life situations, the more fluent and confident you'll become.
Couldn't agree more.
And remember to be patient with yourself along the way.
Absolutely.
Celebrate those small victories.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're just stepping stones on your path to conversational mastery.
Well said.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed diving into these conversational secrets with you.
Me too.
Until next time, happy conversing.